The 2000 Spider-Man game by Neversoft is a product of its time. Normally that phrase is used as a pejorative, but in this case I couldn't mean it as a higher compliment. I absolutely adore the 90s era of Spider-Man comics. We saw the rise of iconic villains like Venom and Carnage, depicted by top-tier talent like Todd McFarlane and Mark Bagley. Although there were some missteps, like how the Clone Saga was handled, there's just an indescribable vibe to the comics, and the Spider-Man franchise as a whole, which felt like lightning in a bottle. Although I would still argue that the Ultimate Spider-Man game is the most accurate comic depiction of Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2000 is neck and neck. More than that, Ultimate Spider-Man is a very specific depiction of a side universe rendition of the character, while Spider-Man 2000 captures the long-running main universe Spider-Man, with its breadth and depth of content. Spider-Man 2000 is a time gate into the classic Amazing Spider-Man comics, and it captures the Amazing Spider-Man better than any game before it or after. With that said, it's a special game to me. Let me uncork that lightning in a bottle and feel it spark. I want to take a look back at this game. I want to look at how it captures the feeling of the comics, in its story and game design, and how its creative use of gameplay mechanics does so much to make the game feel constantly fresh and exciting. Join me on this dive into Spider-Man 2000, and how it holds that Spider-Man spark.
Ooh, are we gonna surf the web?
Let's just go, okay?
The game opens with Dr. Octavius, formerly Dr. Octopus, giving a speech at a tech expo. The year 2000 scrolls across, which makes me feel both nostalgic and very old, but we'll ignore that. Right away, it's apparent that this is a game from the PS1 era. The hands are not so much hands as they are rectangular blocks, and there is no facial animation to speak of, save for Venom. Of course, the graphics from this era aren't going to hold up today. The reason I mention it is because I actually think it works to the game's favor nowadays, at least to me. Action figures were a big part of my childhood. I loved making up my own stories and my own adventures with the likes of Spider-Man and his motley array of villains. I would move their joints around and pretend their mouths were moving, and in that sense, the animations and models of Spider-Man evoke the feeling of playing with action figures. Anyway, back to Oc's speech. He claims that he's reformed, but even his speech sounds villainous. He talks about everyone conforming to a single truth, which sounds like the beginnings of a supervillain manifesto if I've ever heard one.
When humanity conforms to a single truth, a truth based in technological progress and scientific method, we will be unstoppable.
Words, Octavius. If these executives knew you the way I do, I wonder if they'd be so quick to applaud.
Peter Parker agrees with me. He watches from the crowd and is hyper-skeptical of Oct's supposed reformation. Eddie Brock, aka Venom, is also at the expo. He hopes to get pictures for J. Jonah Jameson to revive his journalistic career. Things quickly go haywire when Spider-Man shows up on the scene. Since Peter Parker's in the crowd, we can safely assume this is a ripoff. Peter wants to change into Spider-Man, but he's having a difficult time making his way through the crowd. Speaking of which, Eddie and Peter bump into each other, but Eddie is too distracted to notice. He has his eyes on the prize. He knows these pictures are the exact thing Triple J is looking for. The fraudster Spider-Man makes off with Octavius' device, but not before he smashes Eddie's camera. This sends Eddie into a spiral. His career revival now seems to be in jeopardy, and he pictures JJ harassing him for failing. This puts him over the edge, and the symbiote's influence takes over. He becomes Venom once more, hungry for vengeance on Spider-Man. I just want to say how on brand this is for the 90s Venom. He tries to reform, but he looks for just about any opportunity to revive his hatred for Spider-Man. The smallest slights are able to send him on a bender and reignite his revenge quest. What's funny is that he saw Peter in the crowd, who he knows is Spider-Man, yet he doesn't put two and two together. He doesn't because he doesn't want to. He wants an excuse. This scene cuts to Dr. Octopus and another shadowed individual. He states phase 1 of their plan is complete. Any hope, dim and distant it may be, of auto-reforming has been thrown out of the window. He activates the device that was stolen, covering the city streets in toxic gas. Getting his device stolen, it appears, was a ruse, designed to shift the blame away from himself for activating it. This is a very clean introduction. It moves quickly, and it still succeeds in establishing our characters and their motivations. Peter Parker wants to uncover the imposter and clear his name. Eddie wants revenge on Peter for ruining his career aspirations. There's also intrigue with the inciting incident. We're left with two big questions. Who is the imposter, and what exactly is Otto's master plan? The first level begins with a loading screen, which depicts the level as the cover of a Spider-Man comic. This adds to the feeling that this game is a comic book come to life, but I want to stress just how accurate this cover is to an actual comic book from the time. The corner box in the upper left-hand corner uses the exact same art as the Amazing Spider-Man comics of that era. Here are a couple examples. So as you can see, Neversoft paid attention to the minute details to make this feel authentic. Once the game loads in, we're greeted by the Fantastic Four's Baxter building, along with Stan Lee's narration.
Get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
I mean, can anything make this feel more like a Marvel comic book? I don't think it gets much better than Stan Lee himself amping us up to play the game. The Black Cat joins Spidey on the rooftop, and she lets him know that a nearby bank is being robbed and that there are hostages. Even though Spider-Man has to clear his name, saving the hostages comes first. This is a recurring theme we'll see throughout the game. With that, we're given control of Spider-Man, with the goal of reaching the bank. The base mechanics are pretty simple, as is expected for a game of this era. Spider-Man can punch and kick enemies, but there aren't any combos past the 2 and 3 hit attack chains. There's no dedicated dodge or block button, meaning Spider-Man's sole method of defense is avoidance, either by jumping away or keeping his distance. He can also pick up and throw objects like chairs and barrels when available. Spider-Man additionally has web attacks at his disposal. The basic web attack is webbing up his enemies. If the button is held down long enough, enemies will be completely dispatched. Using a web attack plus a directional input provides a handful more abilities. Forward web attacks create an impact web, which is a hard-hitting projectile. He can also create web gloves to increase his attack power. There's also a protective dome that detonates, and the ability to web yank enemies. Web attacks seem like the go-to moves, with the ability to attack at a distance. The web abilities are balanced by a web meter, which depletes as Spider-Man uses his webbing. Web swinging consists of Spider-Man shooting out 2 web lines at a maximum, with his height steadily decreasing with each swing. There isn't anything in the way of swinging physics. Mechanically, it's more like an extended glide than a swing. Similar to the attacks, web swinging depletes Spider-Man's web meter. Notice that there's a number next to the blue web meter. These are Spider-Man's web cartridges. When the meter depletes, Spider-Man will load another web cartridge in with a nice reload sound. It's very satisfying. This game and its sequel are the only mainline games to tie web swinging to an in-game resource. In later games that have a web meter, they only deplete with web attacks, but you're free to web swing to our heart's content. It gives web abilities clear pros and cons. It makes you think about whether to use web attacks now or save them for an even harder conflict later. These mechanics make this game and its sequel the closest to how Spider-Man's web shooters work in the comics. They're the only games to really make you feel like Spider-Man is using his web shooters. I've been poisoned by the Raimi movies, so I prefer organic webs anyway, but it's still a cool detail. But that's pretty much the extent of the base game mechanics. But the magic of this game is how it creatively uses these mechanics and stretches every bit of ground from them, which we'll see throughout the game. Spider-Man makes his way across the rooftops. Below, gas swallows the city. Although this story mechanic was employed in large part for hardware limitations, as a way to explain away not rendering the city streets and reducing the draw distances, I actually think it adds a lot of personality to the game. The gas is very colorful, and it blends in with the city backdrop on the horizon. It gives the game a whole lot of color, and it creates this vibe that's hard to articulate. It looks like a comic book, where the horizon fades to slumbering yellow. Pretty soon after playing, you get used to the gas, and it becomes second nature. Police choppers descend on the bank, but one's quickly shot out of the sky. It reinforces that these bad guys aren't to be trifled with. Black Cat gives him a warning that even more criminals have been airdropped onto the roof. Here, Spidey can make a quick pit stop at the Fantastic Four's Baxter building and pick up a collectible token. After knocking in some goons' heads, he makes his way into the bank. The criminals have hostages, so Spider-Man has to employ stealth. While the stealth is rudimentary, it does provide some interesting decisions. The path of least resistance is to web up bad guys from the ceiling. However, given that webs are a limited resource, you may be more inclined to drop down to the floor to take down an enemy when the coast is clear. Already, we see the game take the basic game mechanics and do interesting things with them. In this case, it's a layer of stealth. Things get worse when Spider-Man learns that the criminals have armed a bomb. Spidey obviously can't let it go off. The solution to this puzzle is pretty fun. Spidey has to open the bank vault, pick up the bomb, and hurl it into the vault before sealing it shut. This segment takes another basic mechanic, throwing objects, and does something novel and interesting with it. Spider-Man swings off, with the immediate crisis averted, but his larger problems are still at play. And he's given no breathing room to pursue his imposter. J. Jonah Jameson gives Peter a call. He's frantic. The Scorpion is in his office looking to kill him. Spidey has to race across the city before Scorpion can do the deed. This level is similar to the first few, with Spidey having to navigate rooftops filled to the brim with thugs. But this time there's a twist. There's a meter at the top of the screen, depicting the Scorpion chasing down JJ. If he reaches the publisher, well, you can guess what happens. Game over. It's a race against the clock, giving this level an added sense of urgency. It's another example of how the game adds twists to the base gameplay mechanics to keep them interesting. We can hear JJ and Scorpion's tussle as Spider-Man swings, with their head icons enlarging whenever they speak.
Get away, Gargan!
Your time is running out!
It's a nice detail and furthers the urgency. On one of the rooftops, we hear goons stating that they're waiting for Spider-Man. Once he's dead, they get paid. Spider-Man reaches the Bugle in the nick of time, and he puts himself between the Scorpion and JJ. This boss fight is great. Scorpion is stronger than Spider-Man, so just trying to punch him down won't get him very far. The best way to fight Scorpion is to stay at a distance and throw nearby desks and plants at Scorpion. There's a wrinkle, however. Scorpion is still trying to kill JJ, so if you leave Scorpion to his own devices for too long, he'll kill JJ. Worse yet, JJ uses the desk for cover, so the more Spider-Man throws at the Scorpion, the more exposed he leaves Jameson. This fight makes for a great balancing act. We are constantly weighing risk and reward. It's a great spectacle in of itself too, especially with Jameson present. He goes from crabbing at Spider-Man to frantically begging for his help whenever he gets found by Scorpion.
Spider-Man!
He also tells Scorpion at the beginning of the fight to just get over it, which is just priceless.
You put me in this suit, now I'm going to make you pay!
Get over it, Gargan!
Leave it up to JJ to ruin someone's life and blithely tell them to get over it. Immediately after Spider-Man saves his tail, JJ goes right back into jerk mode. He even tells the cops to shoot Spider-Man on sight. The cognitive dissonance of this man is just unbelievable. This is all just such a distilled picture of J. Jonah Jameson, and I love it. Spider-Man bails out, and he quickly runs into another superhero, Daredevil.
I don't want to believe that you pulled off the heist today, but I've got to make sure.
Daredevil! I haven't got time to explain.
Just tell me your side of it. I'll know if you're lying.
It's another great cameo. I really like how the game doesn't spell out exactly how Daredevil knows Spider-Man is telling the truth. It's due to his enhanced senses, but it makes sense in the situation why he wouldn't tell Spider-Man that. This scene also goes to show the general distrust in Spider-Man even among other superheroes. The cameos by him and the Fantastic Four really sell this as a story within the greater Marvel universe. Although Spider-Man's clear in Daredevil's eyes, he's certainly not clear in the eyes of the city. A police chopper catches up to him, and Spider-Man has to flee. This level is fantastic, with Spider-Man constantly having to avoid the chopper's attacks while racing across the city rooftops. It has even more urgency than the Scorpion chase due to active attacks being thrown your way. The spectacle of this level is insanely impressive. The rockets actually destroy parts of the buildings. At one point, an entire floor of a building is blown out. It's a bit risky for the helicopter to launch rockets at friendly cops, but let's brush that aside. The level is so exciting, we can ignore the fact that the cops are committing borderline war crimes here. There's a cool segment where Spider-Man has to climb the side of a building while avoiding a gunman and having to navigate burning floors. This level, perhaps more than any other, is a testament to how this game shakes things up constantly, keeping the basic gameplay mechanics refreshing and engaging. There are some great Easter eggs on this level too. One of the cranes contains a green goblin hideout, replete with pumpkin bombs and gliders. While climbing up the wall, there's a Captain America poster about an interview he has upcoming. There's also a poster with a Bugle headline about lizards overtaking the sewers. This isn't just a cameo, but also foreshadowing to upcoming events in the game. These cameos really help establish this as a connected, cohesive world. Spider-Man evades the cops, but somehow his day gets even worse. He meets up with Black Cat, which isn't the bad part. Venom shows up on the Jumbotron, and he has bad news. He's captured MJ hostage, and he'll kill her in 24 hours if Spider-Man doesn't show up. Problem is, the Rhino's also wreaking havoc on the other side of town at Omnitech. Spider-Man has to make a choice, who to save. This game captures the relentless nature of Spider-Man's life. It's a constant onslaught of conflicting responsibilities, and he has to pick and choose which battles to fight. It's true to the character, and also makes this game's plot constantly keep you at the edge of your seat. Mary Jane has 24 hours, but the civilians at Omnitech don't. Black Cat can't take out the Rhino by herself, so Spider-Man has to save the civilians with her first. This decision speaks to the heart of Spider-Man. The right decision is often the hardest one, and it's the one he has to make. Black Cat is knocked out of commission by the Rhino pretty quickly. Spider-Man's assessment of her ability to fight him appears to be right.
Well, if it ain't Bug Boy!
Spidey brawls with the Rhino. Just like with the Scorpion fight, tangling with the Rhino head-on is a recipe for disaster. It's instead best to keep your distance and wait until he charges. You can lure the Rhino to hit generators and explosive barrels, whittling down his health. This fight is pretty great too, and it differs significantly in mechanics from the Scorpion fight. There are other fun little details that add to the Rhino's character, and add personality to the fight as a whole. Whenever Rhino slugs you, he stops for a moment and laughs at you. It's emblematic of the juvenile bully vibe he gives off. Also, when he gets electrified, his boss icon changes to a picture of him getting electrocuted. It's small details like this that really add up. There's a reason that this Rhino fight has been used as a template for the Rhino boss battles Spider-Man has in future games. After Spider-Man takes him out, the cops show up. Seeing how the police have already expended a small nation's worth of munitions on his butt, he's learned his lesson from last time and he hides. The cops are joined by Dr. Otto Octavius, who helps apprehend Rhino. I think it's hilarious that, even though he's apparently reformed, he still has to have giant arms strapped to himself in some shape or manner. It's very on brand. Peter checks in on Black Cat. She tries to warn him of something, but she can't quite get the words out before the doors shut on her. But I can't say these paramedics look too reputable, at least to my eyes. We see a pair of sinister figures in front of the ambulance. Something tells me that Black Cat isn't getting to that hospital. Peter doesn't pick up the gist though. You know, in defense of him here, he's got a lot going on. For one, his wife is in the clutches of a slobbering maniac. So I'm gonna give him a pass on not being the most observant here. Spider-Man meets on the Statue of Liberty and vents about his current situation with the Human Torch. Their friendship in the comics is one of my favorite superhero relationships, so it makes me happy to see it expressed in the game.
Well, that's my story, Johnny.
Looks like you're in a lot of trouble. You'll find Venom.
But how? Venom is invisible to my spider sense.
Knowing your luck, Venom will find you. Have faith, Spidey.
It's pretty hilarious though how the Human Torch's response is pretty much, "That's tough, bro," and gives him just a pat on his shoulder, not offering to help like at all, even though Peter's literal wife is in danger. With friends like these, who needs enemies, right? It's funny, but obviously this game isn't going to turn into the Human Torch and Spider-Man team-up special, so I'll take this cameo for what it is, a cameo, and leave it at that. Let's assume the Human Torch has his own pressing matters to attend to. Maybe Galactus got hungry again, and he's come to gobble up the Earth as a nice Sunday brunch. The Human Torch says Venom is likely to find Spider-Man instead of the other way around, and he's right about that.
Ranger, got no choice.
Well, what a wuss. Hey, wanna race? Parker hates it when I get the drop on him.
I hate it when he gets the drop on me.
Spidey has to chase Venom across the city rooftops to his hideout. This segment has a similar chase meter to the Scorpion segment. It's another example of the game taking familiar game mechanics and putting a twist on them. The Scorpion would constantly gain on Jameson, making the chase meter a glorified timer. If the Scorpion reached Jameson, it was game over. This time, it's Spider-Man being the pursuer though, and he's chasing Venom. It's game over if Spider-Man gets too far away. Venom moves quickly, and Spidey can lose ground on him quickly. It similarly gives urgency to Spider-Man's movement, but these details give it a lot different of a feel. Venom constantly taunts Spider-Man, somehow increasing your motivation even more to catch him. This game captures the classic era Venom better than just about anything else. In his original incarnation, Venom had a burning hatred for Spider-Man that was sadistic. He liked to play with Spider-Man like a cat plays with its prey. He doesn't want to just outright kill Spider-Man. He wants to mess with him first, because the torment is part of the joy. Venom was oftentimes hilarious, but this humor is often funny only to the audience. It's never funny to Spider-Man. Spider-Man felt tormented by him, and Venom is one of the few villains who truly scared him. This balance between Venom being comic relief while also being believably scary to Spider-Man is an incredibly hard line to walk, but this game does so perfectly. Venom busts into an apartment complex with Spider-Man hot on his heels. A pretty hilarious segment follows.
Get out of my way, nerd! Watch that first step, Parker. It's a doozy.
Ow! Head! Oh, toe, ow!
Yeah, look out, lady.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, sorry, lady. Didn't see a thing.
Eventually, Spider-Man pins Venom in an alley, and they brawl it out. This boss fight is unique because it lacks many gimmicks or puzzles. It's pretty much just a straight punching match with Venom. May the best man win. Well, that's not quite true. Venom can use his symbiote's camouflage to turn invisible and get the drop on Spidey. We rarely see Venom's camouflage ability in later games for some reason, so it's cool to see here. He's a tough foe. His punches can flatten Spider-Man like a pancake, so the impact web or throwables are Spidey's best bet to tip the odds back in his favor. After the battle, Venom dips into the sewers. Spider-Man follows in pursuit, with Venom's taunts continuing. You can hear how fed up Spider-Man's getting.
Laying down on the job, Parker?
Where's my wife, you symbiote freak?
They aren't alone in the sewers. Leftovers from one of the lizard's experiments are lurking down here. This is what the billboard earlier was foreshadowing. I like this because it makes the world feel bigger. Other stuff is going on in the city besides Spider-Man's current quest. The sewers are a nice change of pace, visually as well as gameplay-wise. The pipes require a bit more dexterity to swing across than the rooftops. Spidey drops onto a subway car, where he has to survive the ride against an onslaught of lizards. This is the best combat encounter in the game in my opinion, and it gave me a greater appreciation for the combat system. This fight requires a balance of resources and spacing in order to come out on top. The lizards one-on-one aren't too big of a threat. They can be stun-locked by Spider-Man's attacks, meaning you can just wail on them until they go down. Their threat is in numbers. Even 2 or 3 lizards are enough to overwhelm you, and you'll find Spider-Man's health bar rapidly deteriorate if that happens. On the tram car, it's really easy for them to overwhelm you. You have to have situational awareness and make sure lizards aren't coming from behind or in front of you in too great a numbers. Spider-Man's web abilities can also be used to great effect here. The web yank is especially helpful, as you can yank lizards off the train. Web gloves make for stronger attacks, but they go away if you use another web ability, making them best when things get up and close. The web dome is a great panic move when Spider-Man gets overwhelmed by lizards. He can protect himself at a great cost of his resources. In addition, the segment is timed, so more time cocooned is less time Spider-Man has to fight. Since webbing is a limited resource, you'll be surprised at how quickly he can run out. You can't spam abilities, especially the web dome, which is where the strategy comes in. Health and web pickups fly past you, so keeping an eye out for them can be vital. But you have to keep in mind the swarming lizards, and make sure you're not putting yourself in a bad position just to get a pickup. I did that a couple times during this playthrough. All that to say, the segment's combat is incredibly engaging, and you're actively thinking and playing the whole time. It goes to show how simple mechanics can still lead to interesting gameplay decisions when they are put into creative situations. Venom sucker punches Spider-Man off the train down into a tunnel. You can really see how this guy gets under Spidey's skin so much. Spider-Man has to find another way to reach Venom, and hopefully his wife too, taking on lizard after lizard and solving navigation puzzles. The extensive use of puzzles here is another way the sewer segment is given identity. It's a change of pace from the chase-heavy city rooftops. Eventually, Spider-Man navigates a maze of sewer tunnels. Venom leaves clues of cold, warm, and warmer. This is great use of environmental storytelling to add to his character. You can just picture Venom gleefully writing these messages, knowing that Spider-Man will bumble around this area, growing increasingly frustrated and weary. It shows just how much Venom derives joy out of tormenting Spider-Man, and is how despite some of his more noble qualities, he's a villain. Spider-Man runs into the lizard himself and learns that Venom has taken his lair and holds MJ hostage here. He gives Spider-Man instructions on how to find Venom. When he gets there, it's round 2 of Spider-Man vs. Venom. However, there's a twist. MJ is trapped in the middle, bound by chains over a pool of water. There are a variety of switches to lower the chains. Venom will cloak reappear and flip the switches. If Spidey doesn't get them off in time, and MJ goes too low, well, things aren't going to look great for Miss Parker. So it's largely the same fight, with the added urgency of MJ's dire situation. Venom has no shortage of taunts and mockery to throw Peter's way. Eventually, Spider-Man gets the upper hand. He asks Venom why he returned, and Eddie explains. As I talked about earlier, what I love about this segment is that it should have been obvious to Eddie that Peter was innocent. However, he let his pure hatred for Spider-Man cloud his better judgment, and it was more of an excuse than anything else. He wants a reason to hate Spider-Man. But Eddie can't deny the truth this time. Still, you get the feeling that this is only this time. Sooner or later, he'll find something else to blame on Spider-Man, and this hunt will begin anew. He's also pretty casual about having threatened MJ's life as my bad, and blames Peter for being in the doghouse.
Parker, our bad.
Our bad? Our bad? I'm gonna kill
Peter
you!
Parker! Just get me out of here now!
Bummer. You're in the doghouse now, dude.
Coming, honey.
It's funny, but again, another sign that his screws are more than just a little loose. They decide to team up and brainstorm what to do next.
So, we're partners, but only for now. After we bust those tech thieves, it's payback time for kidnapping my wife.
Jeez, one little mistake. We said we're sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Now, the imposter was a shapeshifter, so that means it was either Mysterio or the Chameleon.
Hey, Chameleon was our idea. We thought of that.
Tell me this, Einstein. Who could have wanted to steal Octavius' technology?
Ooh, we know.
Who?
The Submariner.
Submariner? Get serious, will you?
The mighty Thor.
Are you out of your mind? Don't answer that.
Galactus.
Forget it, Eddie. I need Jameson's help on this. We're going to the Bugle.
Jameson. We hate Jameson.
You bonehead. We're not going to see Jameson. We're going to use his computer database.
Ooh, are we gonna surf the web?
Let's just go.
This brainstorming is a bit one-sided. Venom really is priceless in this game. I wanted to find just a clip out of here to play, but I couldn't pick one, so I just played the whole thing. Spidey and Venom head to the Bugle to check out their database. Venom detects Carnage's presence, and he has a meltdown. He dives out of the window, leaving Spider-Man to his own devices. And from there, things rapidly deteriorate. Peter turns around to see symbiote monsters. Whatever's going on here isn't good. Along with doing YouTube, I'm also a science fiction writer. I have a science fiction series called the Northfield Saga, which stars a man named Mark Northfield as he navigates the moral grays of a post-apocalyptic world. I didn't realize a big similarity between this game and my novel series until making this video. In my series, the world is enshrouded by toxic gas. Due to reasons I won't spoil, the gas floods the city streets, but it doesn't get above a certain altitude, leaving the city's highest skyscrapers free from the gas, which is a pretty funny coincidence to some parts of this game now that I look at it. But anyway, the series is something I'm proud of, so if you'd like to support me further, please consider checking out the series and buying my books. Links are in the description. So, the Daily Bugle has been infested by symbiotes. Not good. Even worse is the fact that there are innocent people in the Bugle. Spider-Man's priorities are clear. Save the civilians, then figure out where these symbiotes are coming from. The symbiotes are incredibly deadly. Just a single one of them can whittle Spider-Man's health down to nearly nothing. They have a ton of health too, and they do a lot of damage. Taking down a single one is a challenge, and you tend to expend a good amount of your resources doing it. That's not even to mention when these guys team up on you. The symbiote's deadliness, gameplay-wise, does a great job of highlighting the threat they present narratively. They're an apocalyptic level threat, so it makes sense that they aren't going to be as easy to take down as your neighborhood goon. This makes it so Spider-Man's best strategy is avoidance. The less he can deal with the symbiotes, the better. It gives the gameplay a lot different of a flavor than the continuous lizard combat we faced earlier. Once the civilians are safe, Spider-Man plunges deeper to find the symbiote's source. There's a cool elevator set piece where Spider-Man has to ride the elevator down to break through symbiote nests. Symbiotes of course drop onto the shaft. The best method of defeating them is positioning. Knocking the symbiotes off the elevator is a faster way of taking them down. Occasionally the elevator stops working and Spider-Man has to get off and reactivate it. It's a similar concept to the train section, where Spider-Man is riding on some transport to reach an objective while fending off baddies. However, the different nature of the symbiotes as an enemy, plus the fact that Spider-Man has to disembark, makes this section feel fresh and novel. Again, I'm impressed at just how much this game twists its base formula to keep each new set piece exciting. Our webbed hero makes it to the printer room, and you discover symbiote generators that he has to disable. Fun fact, Spider-Man can die if he steps onto the printer belts. I learned that one the hard way. The key once more is avoidance. Spider-Man is best served by hopping in, destroying a generator, then hopping back out. Here though, Spider-Man comes across a weapon that helps him better take on the symbiote threat: flame webs. All of Spider-Man's web abilities are amped up with a fire effect. Fire is one of the symbiote's greatest weaknesses, so you can imagine how handy this is to take on our new goopy buddies. After the printer room comes the basement, where Spider-Man has to destroy even more generators. He isn't alone, however. Past the flames in the furnaces, you can spot another familiar face. It's Spider-Man. At last, we've found the imposter that's defaced Spider-Man's good name. He catches up to the evildoer and they square off face to face. The imposter's identity is finally revealed. It's none other than Mysterio, fishbowl extraordinaire, master of illusions and disguise. He grows to giant proportions and plans on squashing Spider-Man. That wasn't in our evening plans, so Spidey's gotta cancel. I love the Mysterio's character design in this game. He has a classic costume, but there are swirling glowing discs in his helmet, which adds just that extra bit of pizzazz to make him pop in a video game. Spider-Man has to attack Mysterio's yellow nodules while dodging a litany of attacks from his foe, from stomps to rotating wheel blades to outright laser beams. It's quite unlike any of the other boss fights in the game, which again goes to this game's great ability to provide variety. There are even multiple phases to the fight. Past that, however, I don't have a whole lot of amazing things to say about this boss. Spider-Man has to jump between different levels. The camera is at its worst here while trying to track him. Spider-Man has to use his impact webbing to destroy the nodules, which means using the forward arrow on the direction pad plus the web attack button. Moving forward will also cause Spider-Man to drop to the next level. So reorienting yourself from dodging some attack to facing Mysterio, then hitting forward in a web without accidentally dropping down, is an incredibly clunky endeavor. Past that though, I think conceptually the fight is a bit of a miss. Mysterio is the master of illusion, and the world is your oyster as far as designing a boss fight. Going the route of just making him a giant that stomps on you doesn't feel like the most inspired route to go with, and it's a missed opportunity. Spidey eventually defeats Mysterio. He refuses to reveal the mastermind behind all of this, but he does let the plan itself slip. They plan on releasing a symbiote invasion across New York City. Spider-Man's distress is evident. He knows from personal experience that the symbiotes cannot be controlled. The mastermind is releasing a Pandora's box that he knows next to nothing about. Spider-Man also manages to get a location out of the dome head, a warehouse along the waterfront. He heads there desperate to stop this threat. Along the way, he runs into the Punisher of all people. He offers to team up with Spider-Man to take on the warehouse, but Spider-Man turns him down, with his habit of killing people and all that. There's a certain vibe to the cameos in this game that you don't really get nowadays. We obviously get a ton of cameos throughout the Marvel and DC movies, but I always get this feeling of expectation behind them. A character is revealed, and there's this brief pause where the audience is expected to applaud. The cameos feel very manufactured in that sense. Don't get me wrong, the cameos in this game are also fan service, but there's also an organicness to them. Their purpose is to simply paint the Marvel Universe as it was in the comics, where heroes cross paths on a frequent basis. This is something that's hard for me to articulate, so hopefully that all made sense. It's just a bygone era, I guess. The warehouse, unfortunately, is stuffed to the brim with symbiotes who pop out fresh from generators. Spidey makes his way through and destroys them, with an ample amount of fire webbing at his disposal. He reaches a very advanced-looking tunnel, replete with laser turrets aimed squarely at him. While the symbiotes have been ramping up of the combat challenge, this section is a ramping up of the traversal challenge. Spidey has to navigate across the elevated platforms as the floor underneath is electrified. Meanwhile, the turrets aren't just for show. They fire at Spider-Man with no hint of mercy. It's good pacing how both the traversal and combat have been ramping up in difficulty in anticipation to the game's conclusion. He makes it to the control room, which, to nobody's surprise, contains more symbiotes. Spider-Man's best bet is to navigate around them. He finds Black Cat trapped in a cell. If you recall, she is taken after the Rhino fight in an ambulance. He goes to find a way to break her out, as well as to destroy the devices that have been swamping Manhattan in toxic mist. Once he's accomplished both of these, he decides to finish this once and for all. He and Black Cat split up, with him heading deeper into the facility while she goes and finds help. Spider-Man at last confronts the mastermind behind the symbiote madness. It's none other than Dr. Octopus, aided by the murderous Carnage. Doc Ock isn't as reformed as he once appeared. This, of course, isn't that much of a surprise. It's pretty evident from the get-go who the villains behind this are. However, I don't think this comes across as a great letdown, because the game doesn't focus all that much on the mystery aspect of the plot, as far as the masterminds go. Spider-Man himself says that he shouldn't be surprised when Doc Ock's reform has been greatly exaggerated.
I should have known a reformed Doc Ock was too good to be true.
Ock reveals the true intention of his plan. He plans on forcing everyone to bond with the symbiote and unify under his grand vision. This harkens back to Ock's opening speech, where he talks about conforming everyone under a single truth. The true intention behind that, of course, was more sinister than most people in that expo crowd anticipated. Venom shows up too, ready to tango.
Speaking of crushed, it's showtime, freaks!
Venom, a slobbering maniac, having the gall to call others freaks is something I find just hilarious. He and Carnage brawl, leaving Spider-Man to face Doc Ock in a 1v1 fight. Ock is surrounded by a protective force field. Spider-Man has to divert a power away from the force field, draining it and leaving Ock open to attack. This boss fight is okay. Spider-Man having to jump over electrified barriers and hit switches does make this fight unique mechanically from the others. It doesn't feel like it really captures the unique essence of Dr. Octavius and his power set though. You could take any villain and put them in the center of the force field, and the fight wouldn't be much different. The other fights have done a good job of pulling the identity of the villain into the mechanics of the fight. Venom's camouflage ability lends to the hide-and-seek nature of his fight in the sewers. Scorpion's hatred of JJ is reflected in his fight, where he is actually attacking JJ the whole time. Rhino's stupidity and tenacity to charge is shown in his arena. You don't get quite that same identity in Ock's fight here. Spidey defeats Ock, but unfortunately Venom doesn't hold his weight. What a slacker. Carnage's tendrils snake down from the rafters, grabbing Spidey and pulling him into a new arena. It's boss fight round 2. This time it's against Carnage. In the center of the arena sits a sonic emitter. The game actually goes to the lengths of explaining why the emitter is here, which I appreciate. It's a failsafe Doc Ock put in case Carnage betrayed him. Given Carnage's maniacal, loose cannon nature, I totally buy that Doc Ock would be constantly watching his back around him. This boss fight is an improvement over the Ock fight. The fight I feel is characteristic of Carnage's identity mechanics-wise. Carnage is too strong to take on in a straight punch-out. In fact, he is a handful for both Spidey and Venom to take on at the same time, so attacking him directly won't work. Instead, Spider-Man has to knock him into the sonic emitter. There are a few ways to do this. One is just punching him in. I opted for a safer path. I used the web yank ability to stay at a distance, pulling him into the emitter instead. Once Carnage is defeated, the day looks saved. Spidey's enemies are defeated, and the city is cleared of mist. Mission accomplished, right? Time to head back home. Things deteriorate though quickly. The Carnage symbiote falls onto Doc Ock below, creating a new abomination, Monster Ock. Spider-Man doesn't even bother fighting him. The lab breaks down around him. It's time to run. The final segment is a chase sequence But this time, that formula is flipped on its head. This time, Spider-Man is the one getting chased. It's impressive that even in its closing minutes, the game does something fairly novel. Let's look at this situation story-wise. The underwater facility is caving in around our hero. He is being chased by an amalgamation of two of his deadliest enemies, like some dog after its bone. Based on this, how should we as the player, an extension of Spider-Man, feel in this climactic moment? I'd say we should feel anxious, fearful, and high tension. The question is, does this game communicate these emotions? Does it make us feel stressed and scared? Yes, absolutely, 100%. In fact, I would say this is one of the most anxiety-inducing segments I've played in any game ever. When I think of high-tension moments, I think of this moment in this game. And I've played a couple horror games like Dead Space and Evil Within. I'm not an expert by any means in the genre, but I have played some games that are specifically trying to engineer tension. And this part in Spider-Man gets me more tense than any chase sequence in those games. Why is this chase so stressful? Well, I think Monster Ock is legitimately terrifying, even in his blocky, low-pixel form. The idea of him is stressful. You know Spider-Man can't possibly take him on in a fight. The way he constantly screams die in a guttural, mangled voice just gets my blood pressure up. I think a big factor too is that you actually have to perform well in this chase. In a lot of other games, the scripted chases are actually pretty hard to lose. As long as you're tilting the stick forward, you'll be okay. This final section of Spider-Man is the final navigation test. If you're not performing at your best, if you slip up, Ock will catch up with you. And that makes this section even more tense. It may not look like much just watching the footage, but when you have the control in your hand, I'm telling you, it just hits different. Alright, I think I've gone on enough about this chase. It's effective and it truly ends the game on a bang. Spidey makes it out of the base, but with seemingly nowhere to go. Just in the nick of time though, Black Cat arrives with help. In retrospect, it was a great idea to split up. Spider-Man boards the ship with none other than Captain America in the pilot's seat. They fly away as the underwater base explodes behind them. The fun's not quite over yet though. Spidey joins his fellow superheroes in a game of cards. As I've talked about before, these cameos really go a far way in making the story feel like one chapter in the Marvel Universe's grand story. The best way to describe them is earnest, I think. You can tell the developers had a ball making this game. Having Venom ask Cap for an autograph while despising Spider-Man, and having the Punisher accuse Daredevil of looking at his cards are just funny moments. What more can I say? The supervillains for their part are playing cards too. Unfortunately for them, it's from the cold comforts of a prison cell. Rhino gets a bit too enthused about his hand and prematurely celebrates. Doc Ock has to lie in the bed he's made, and justice has never felt so sweet. With that, New York City is once again at peace, and the game ends. The fun doesn't quite stop there though. There's more fun to be had in Spider-Man past just beating the main story once. First of all, there's a gallery of alternate costumes that you can unlock for Spider-Man. There are classics like the black suit, the 2099 costume, and the Scarlet Spider suit. The costumes aren't just cosmetic, however. Based on the suit, there are additional powers and gameplay modifiers. The black suit, for instance, gives Spider-Man unlimited webbing. The 2099 suit provides double strength. If you pick one of the civilian suits, which lacks a web belt, you're constrained to only 2 web cartridges. What's awesome about these powers is that they make sense lore-wise for the costume. The black suit produces its own webbing, so it having unlimited webbing in the game follows suit. The Spider-Man Unlimited suit can even cloak. It's a really cool system, and it goes just that extra mile in making the game feel like an authentic extension of the comics. You can see how later games have adopted similar systems. That's not all though. There are a variety of training challenges to test Spider-Man's combat and traversal prowess, enabling you to push to your gameplay limits. There's also a section to enter cheat codes. The main one I want to point out is the What If mode. What If is based off a series of Marvel comics that created alternate reality stories, essentially asking what if on certain Marvel events. This mode adds small and sometimes big changes to the game. My favorite is that on the police chase level, there's now a giant blimp in the air. Spider-Man can board it, entering a new sub-level. This is just crazy to me. It's an addition that goes far and beyond. Overall, the extras in Spider-Man go that extra mile to expand the Spider-Man mythos past just the main game, and I think the added sense of authenticity and just fun truly makes these extras greater than the sum of their parts. As I said at the beginning of the video, Neversoft's Spider-Man game is a product of its time. The game has clear technical limitations, and its combat and movement feel very simple compared to later games. However, I think this game thrives in some ways because of those technical limitations. In art, limitations are often what inspire the greatest creativity. It's one reason why so many types of poetry have strict rules. Being forced into the syllables of a haiku can often spur a better poem than if you were just left with a blank page and paper. In a similar way, I think Neversoft having to work with simplistic combat and movement systems and being challenged to keep those systems engaging for the entire game spurred great creativity. This game has such a variety of setups and ideas. No two segments of the game feel alike. The chopper chase, with its great set pieces, feels wholly different to the more relaxed first few levels, or skulking in the cramped and twisted sewers with hordes of enemies. Past that though, this game is a true homage to the Amazing Spider-Man comics, especially those from the late 90s. The story feels straight out of the comics, with Peter pulled in different directions, and the city faces danger from a variety of foes. The characters, from their dialogue to their gameplay designs, feel authentic. The world feels even greater than the short draw distance paints due to the clever cameos and Easter eggs. The game is greater than the sum of these parts, and there's just a feel to it that I find hard to describe. It's my own nostalgia, sure, but I also think this game captures lightning in a bottle. It captures a classic age of Spider-Man in an authentic way, and that makes this game incredibly fun for me to revisit. The aging of the 20-year-old mechanics truly fade into the background. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment to let me know your own thoughts on the game, or games in general. If you want to support me even further, please check out my Northfield series. Until next time.